Back in the day, before streaming, before CDs, we listened to music on albums. A vinyl disc spinning 33 and a third revolutions per minute brought us great music one side at a time. 20 or so minutes of music, 4 or 5 songs usually, that created a single listening experience. This format exposed us to other songs of the artist, not just the hits, and often flowed in an order that was created to build and maintain or mold a musical experience for the listener.
Sideshow brings musical experiences from the past to life today. Here, we discuss and review individual sides of record albums we have grown to appreciate and hope you will too. Welcome to The Sideshow.
Well, welcome everybody back to The Sideshow. Mike is going to be kicking us off today. So, Mike, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to be talking about today?
Thanks, Mark. Today we're going to be talking about David Bowie's album, Hunky Dory, from 1971, Side 1.
Nice.
David Bowie was a very significant performer during the 1970s. And he continued to record and perform, into the 80s and thereafter. I don't recall the exact year that he died, but he continued to do a lot of work until relatively shortly before he passed away. But his, really, when he was a major force in the music world was during the 70s, and really one of the albums that I think initially defined kind of who he was going to turn out to be in the long run was the album Hunky Dory, which, as I said, came out in 1971. David Bowie, very interesting character from England. And he was, at least during a lot of his career, kind of based in the London area. Mm-hmm. His initial album that was released was in 1967. It was just called David Bowie. And to be candid, I've never actually listened to the entirety of that album. I've never owned it either in vinyl or CD form. And he was sort of a kind of a folky, but kind of offbeat character at that time. Not unlike a Syd Barrett-like character, although I've seen a copy of the photo on that album, and he looks like a member of Herman's Hermits or something like that. He just has a sort of a young English guy in the mid-late 60s look about him. Nothing particularly unusual about it. But eventually he released an album that was just also called David Bowie in 1969 that had the song Space Oddity on it. And most people have heard that song at one time or another about Major Tom blasting off as an astronaut. And he got some notoriety, although he didn't get really big at that time. And there were there was an album that was released after the 1969 David Bowie album that was sort of like kind of like a patchwork of things that had been recorded. It wasn't an official new recording that was called The World of David Bowie. And I have not heard most of the material on that album either.
He kind of bounced around. There was a number. We tend to focus on albums and album sides. That's the sideshow. But he had, through a number of different bands and kind of solo work, put out like a lot of singles. He put out a lot of material. He was trying a lot of things. Was really having a tough time getting any traction on the things that things that he was doing. So there was material that was out there for them to start to kind of compile and have like this world of David Bowie that's kind of a collection of some of the different things that he'd done up to that point, because he'd been trying for a while as we got to this point.
Well, that's all true. And I actually read years ago, I mean, not that many years ago, but within the last 5 years, I read a biography of David Bowie, and again, to be candid, just I can't remember all the details of precisely what he was doing at that point in his career, but he hadn't really found a way to gain any traction. However, with the Space Oddity, with that song, because kind of Spaceman was a thing that was going to kind of stick with him to some extent for the following however many years, and so there was something about that not only caught the attention of the listening public to some extent at that time in 1969, but also sort of gave Bowie a context that he was going to continue to be able to go back to and mine for material. After his sort of eponymously titled 1969 second one, the 1969 album, he recorded an album that was called and just a second before I move on to the next album, I have never owned the David Bowie 1969 album. It was eventually, when David Bowie became a little more popular, it was eventually re-released, at least in the United States, with the title Space Oddity. That was the name of the album. That was sort of a re-release of the same material. And I have heard a number of the songs off that album, but I've never owned that album either in LP or CD form. And so I can't comment really on a lot of it, but it was, I think, a little stranger than the 1967 album for just to kind of not dwell on that. It was a little stranger, And
we'll leave it at that.
And at some point, I believe in 1970, Bowie released an album called "The Man Who Sold the World," and I do possess that album on vinyl. And the album cover that was released in the United States, it was sort of black with an illustration of David Bowie on it, kind of in a rock and roll sort of context. He had an acoustic guitar, but he was kicking his foot and had this, sort of, fuck you look on his face. And the material on that album is much more hard rock in nature. Kind of a sludgy guitar sound, not almost like Black Sabbath or something like that. Some of the songs, that album opened up with this 8-minute track called "Width of a Circle," and it was definitely guitar oriented hard rock. Now I described the album cover just before, but the English album release had David Bowie where it's a picture of him. He's wearing a dress. So sort of that aspect of David Bowie was sort of kind of starting to find its way out into the world. And also the Man Who Sold the World album, I believe, was the first coupling that David Bowie had with the guitarist Mick Ronson, who stayed with him for a number of years, including through his Ziggy Stardust phase. But it was not. There were no. It wasn't the sort of stuff you heard on the radio.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't really any greatest hits material on The Man Who Sold the World. Although there were some. There were some songs that that stuck around for a while after that. He had a song called "All the Madmen," which was about someone who was in a mental institution, and I believe that David Bowie has a sibling who was mentally ill and institutionalized, and
Hmm.
so Bowie did, I believe, have some personal kind of experience with those sort of things, and also kind of connected to the Syd Barrett type situation, which in England in 1970 was something that people that were kind of plugged into the scene, like David Bowie would have been at that time, were kind of aware of.
Yeah.
Syd Barrett, the original guitarist for Pink Floyd,
Hmm.
who drug induced or not, just became, he was mentally ill,
Began
and
to struggle.
he began to struggle and wasn't able, and he stopped being a musician and moved back in with his mother, etc. But in any event, in 1971, he recorded and released the album Hunky Dory, and it really, and I this isn't any groundbreaking, revelation or anything like that, but I think it's generally accepted, and I certainly believe that kind of the David Bowie that those of us who came of age in the 1970s were initially exposed to, with sort of the red, you know, glam rock androgynous
Hmm.
hair and makeup and whatnot. Hunky Dory is the album that first really, that's where he first established himself in that realm.
Someone described it as that's when Bowie started to become Bowie.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that for lack of a better way of putting it. And the album, which I've got here, is the cover is, let's call it, androgynous.
Yes.
It doesn't show what he's wearing, but I mean his hair and the look on his face, relatively effeminate.
Hmm.
And on the back cover, it's got a very unglamorous picture of David Bowie, and
Yep.
the kind of the songs and whatnot are handwritten in what appears to be pencil. At least the copy that I purchased does not have a gatefold. But uh, uh, and like I say, on the English cover of The Man Who Sold the World, he'd already posed for a photo on one of his albums wearing a dress, and so there's nothing particularly unusual at this
Hmm.
point about the way that Bowie presented himself, but it's something that kind of continued for some period of time, where he maintained this sort of androgynous glam rock persona, and he hadn't gotten to the glam rock part of it really on Hunky Dory. But it again, it's so there's a progression of things that started to kind of become part of Bowie's persona, sort of the spaceman,
Yeah.
androgyny, etc. And so it's an understandable progression. But so the table was kind of set for Bowie to kind of really embark on his 70s career with this album. And so that, and there's a lot of very interesting things that Bowie did over the rest of the 70s that we could talk about at great length. But that can be for another day because we're focusing
Sure.
on Hunky Dory today.
Well, and I think that this is a big, well, it's a continuation of his notion of, being a musician, but more importantly, being a performer. It wasn't just about the music that was important. He was a performer. You know, he had been for a little amount of time anyway. He had done work as a mime. He understood the whole notion of performance, the visual aspect of it, and I think that for him to actually like come of age as a performer and really start to be successful, I think he really felt he needed to combine a lot of these different aspects to kind of center him on the music that he wanted to play. So, a lot of these other things that people talk about his personas and these types of things, I think were really critical to him to drive good music.
And what you say is true, although I I think that on this album he hadn't quite made the jump to where, the performance was something that was in addition to the music. I mean, the two albums that follow Hunky Dory, Ziggy Stardust and Aladdin Sane, there's no question that, when Bowie was performing, I mean, he was Ziggy Stardust.
Ziggy Stardust, yeah.
And, so when you went to see David Bowie, you were going to see Ziggy Stardust as a practical
I'd buy that.
matter.
I would buy that transition had not been made, or that influence and real change and really personifying his persona. I would agree, but I believe he was starting on that journey by this time.
I wouldn't push back on you there, but one could argue that this was the album where it was still the music that predominated, and it wasn't so much a co-equal aspect of what he was putting out there with the visual performance, both in how he presented himself and how his live performances were theatrical.
Sure.
Or
Absolutely.
as theatrical as they became.
And he clearly, too, though, was looking for something a little different on this album musically than what he had been doing before. As you mentioned, I mean, you go back before this, you're getting some harder rock type of much more guitar oriented. And for this particular album, he didn't even use the guitar to do a lot of the composition. He did a lot of it on the piano. And that comes through on a number of these songs where you're really hearing much more piano than you're hearing guitar.
One more of a music hall style than a rock and roll style to some extent, and not a lot of I mentioned that The Man Who Sold the World was kind of a guitar oriented hard rock sound. That you could legitimately compare to some like aspects of Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Nothing like that on here.
No, this is not a Black Sabbath album.
And it's not really a guitar album.
Yeah.
I mean the electric guitar, at least on side one, is just not a major a factor in the music. David Bowie, he played piano, he could play keyboards. He could play saxophone. He could play guitar. I mean, he wasn't like gonna, be playing a Stratocaster lead type guitar, but definitely not. But the saxophone you can hear.
Yeah.
For example, on the opening track on side one, which is one of Bowie's better known songs. And really one of his more straightforward songs lyrically, which is called Changes. And, that was something that was played on the radio and, was on his first greatest hits album called Changes One Bowie, and is, for people that grew up in sort of our era, it's something they would have heard on the radio.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward song about the changes that people go through, and he both talks about himself, and he kind of had to look himself in the mirror and know himself, and how others must see the faker, and whatnot. He also sort of chides the older generation for not give the young people a chance to, go through these changes like you have. And then also, it says, watch out, you look out, you rock and rollers. Also kind of pointing out to the sort of young people that are going to be listening to his music. Pretty soon now, you're going to get older. And so it's a song about the changes that people go through in their own lives, and how people, grow older and wiser as time goes by. And he's talking about that's just the way it is, changes, turn and face the strange. And I've seen on the internet that some lyrics that that say that the lyric is "turn and face the strain." Whether that's the strain of growing older, the strain
Yeah.
of having to deal with perpetual change or whatever. I don't know, but I'd never heard, when I hear him say "turn and face the strange," meaning the new, the things that you are
Yeah.
not familiar with, and accept the changes that come in.
And that, which is, I mean, we've actually, in discussing other albums, this focus on, as artists are getting a little bit older, and they start to see this idea of, look, as you get more responsibility, you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. This idea of getting away from things that you're comfortable with, and moving into the uncomfortable, and whether it be as a musician working with other types of music, or I've always, as most people do, that they hear this really is about life and the changes you make, and the progression. And it's a nice song to listen to. It's the lyrics, they move along. It's a serious topic, the changes of life. And he doesn't spare the older generation. They might be getting wiser, but they're getting a little meaner too. I mean, he literally says in there, these children that you spit on as they try to change their world. He's hitting pretty hard on how the older generation treats the younger generation as he's talking about them.
Yeah. And the style of the song is it's not a rock song really,
Yeah.
but it's got that rock and roll spirit to it. Because like you say, as the older generation spitting on the younger, they are immune to your consultations. They're quite
Hmm.
aware of what they're going through. There is a certain stick it to the man attitude behind those lyrics, but the 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 way that the style that the song is presented musically, it's sort of like a kind of just a little offbeat English version of Frank Sinatra almost.
Yeah.
And that's not really the best comparison, but it's of a type of performer that predated rock and roll,
Hmm.
but has been able to kind of step into the role of a rock singer. And it's really I think it is one of David Bowie's signature songs.
Oh,
And
yes.
while there's a lot of other material by David Bowie that I listen to more frequently and like better than I like this album. This was one of his first sort of great compositions, great recordings that kind of like we were saying earlier, kind of put him on the map as Bowie.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I think there was some aspects of it too that made it, easy to listen to and easy to sing along to. That ch changes. I can see people when I was younger, or in the service or in college or whatever, singing along to that song. I mean, when the song came out, it was something that easily stuck in people's head, and stayed there, and was easy for them just to jump in and sing along as he started to sing those choruses. So it's just a great song, a very popular song.
well, and that ch, it's almost like the stuttering that the Who did in My
Yeah,
Generation.
yeah, yeah.
And that's certainly something that Bowie, being, a young English rocker in the late '60s in London, would have been obviously very familiar with. But in any case, it's a great opener for any album,
Yep.
and certainly a good opener for Hunky Dory. Less straightforward is at least lyrically is the second song on the side, which is called "Oh You Pretty Things."
Hmm.
And you could you ask five different people about what they think the song is about, you'd probably get five different answers. I don't know how complicated it really is. But the it's a piano oriented song, and the uh, the first verse it sets a kind of an interesting scene, and it's worth sort of laying it out here. Just he sings, "Wake up, you sleepy head. Put on some clothes. Shake up your bed. Put another log on the fire for me. I've made some breakfast and coffee. Look up my window. What do I see? A crack in the sky and a hand reaching down to me.
Hmm.
All the nightmares came today, and it looks like they're here to stay." Now, uh, the singer is sitting there having his coffee in the morning, wondering, okay, what is the day going to bring? Looks out the window, and here is the hand of someone coming out of the sky, reaching for him.
Hmm.
Uh, uh,
I I've always seen this as the narrator here is an older person, and either waking up, their older spouse or partner, kind of, hey, let's wake up to see the day, potentially waking up like one of their kids that needs to be woken up. But it's time to get the day going, and kind of a realization, I'm getting to the end. In fact, there's a hand that is coming down to grasp me from above. And one of these days it's gonna be there. And just the notion of all the nightmares came today and it looks like they're here to stay, I think, is just more of the notion of the complexities and difficulties and frustrations that come along with any adult life. I just see this. I've always heard it as an older person with some messaging to either to the younger generation, to their kids, or to their grandkids. Now, if you read all the lyrics, some of them seem to vary from that a little bit. So to your point, you ask a bunch of different people, and we'll never be able to ask David. So, we'll just have to go with what we know.
the well, and at towards the end of the second verse, where the books were found by the golden ones, written in pain, written in awe, by a puzzled man who questioned what we were here for. All the strangers came today, and it looks as though they're here to stay.
Hmm.
The Bowie was very interested in things that both Aleister Crowley, the occultist,
Mr. Crowley.
and Friedrich Nietzsche had
Yeah.
written. And I think in this song, the golden, the use of the word golden, there was something, and I've never read stuff by Aleister Crowley. I'm familiar
Hmm.
with who he is from,
Yeah.
like whether it's Ozzy Osbourne, Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page was very,
Yeah.
very interested in Aleister Crowley. And some of his writings talked about the golden dawn or the golden age,
Hmm.
or I mean, so that may be a reference to Aleister
Yeah.
Crowley, but I think this song, I think that Nietzsche is more of what Bowie is focused on, and the puzzled man who questioned what we were here for, I guess I see as Nietzsche. And the
Hmm.
chorus of the song, goes, "Oh, you pretty things, don't you know you're driving your mamas and papas insane? Let me make it plain, gotta make way for the homo superior." I mean, in the homo superior, that's the Ubermensch that Nietzsche wrote about. I mean,
Hmm.
unlike Aleister Crowley, I have read a number of books by Friedrich Nietzsche, and
Hmm.
that's if you've got the time and the inclination to immerse yourself in philosophy, reading books by Friedrich Nietzsche is just enough to screw you up for the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life. There you go.
Is about all I can say about that. Um, uh, but I mean, I think that Nietzsche is the puzzled man who questioned what we
Hmm.
were here for, and uh, just the sort of upbeat manner that the chorus is sung in. That,
Hmm.
"Oh, you pretty things, Don't you know you're driving your mamas and papas insane? I mean, that's referring to young people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so, like at the beginning of the song, where the singer is looking up into the sky and seeing the hand reaching down for him, I interpret the song to be about how, young people are going to do something different in the world that has yet been done.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the new, or the younger, which in 1971, I mean, that was still kind of like hippie culture,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
sort of thing, at least in part. And that, the "Oh You Pretty Things." I mean, this was at the very beginning of people like David Bowie, and glam rockers who, male artists were putting on makeup, not just stage makeup, but much more involved things of that nature. And androgyny was something that Bowie had already started to dabble in, and was going to continue for a number of years into the future. And so I guess I look at the pretty thing, "Oh You Pretty Things," as being young people in general. Although I have to say there were two women who lived in the dormitory that I lived in when I very first went to college. So I'm 18, living in a college dormitory in Minneapolis at the University of Minnesota. Uh, a lot of different kinds of people, a lot of young people who liked music, who wanted to be socializing, partying, dancing,
Mm-hmm.
etc., etc., along with going to school
Yeah.
and more intellectual pursuits than just those kind of things. But there were two young women who lived in the dorm. They were roommates, and I won't say their real names, but our friend group referred to them as Trixie and Biffy.
Mm-hmm.
And and these were the sort of these I mean, these two hung out with us, but I mean, they were way out of my league.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when I think of "Oh You Pretty Things," I think of these two young women
Mm-hmm.
are the sort of people he was talking about. Um, and uh, and given Bowie's androgyny, and
Mm-hmm.
and references to him being potentially bisexual and whatnot. I mean, I think that people look at there's potentially gay references
Mm-hmm.
to that or whatever. But I mean, to me, pretty things were young women or young people in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when uh, the next verse after the first chorus, "Look out at your children, see their faces in golden rays, don't kid yourself, they belong to you, they're the start of the coming race, the earth is a bitch, we finished our news, homo sapiens have outgrown their use." um I mean, the singer is talking about the world is changing, and
Yep.
the lives your children live are going to be different than the lives that you've lived.
Mm-hmm.
Is what he's saying. And it's, despite the fact that he makes these, this, what I think is an explicit reference to Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's all that complicated what he's really saying.
Yeah.
um, uh,
I'd agree.
uh, and uh, and in some ways, I mean, this hand reaching down from the sky, I mean, that's kind of what happened in Ziggy Stardust.
Mm-hmm.
This, the someone from outer, this rock star from outer space had to come down and tell the world, you better watch it, or you're gonna explode in 5 years.
Yeah.
So something's got to change. And like Starman, Starman kind of came down and let your children boogie,
Yeah.
sort of thing. Uh, it's But in any case, those are my thoughts about "Oh, You
Well,
Pretty Things."
and I think that this is a great example of something that Bowie did very well through his entire career, and again more than just okay. Here's a good sounding guitar riff or piano riff or whatever it happens to be. Let's layer on some good lyrics and let's get it out the door. This song is a good example. There's even some better ones later on in the on the side here that there's the pieces of this song are connected, and much like a movie that builds on tension, they never have the cat just jump out of the closet or the cut off head, roll off the shelf on someone. They build to it to make it a more pronounced moment. And this song, the verses are very gentle. There's kind of some playful piano that is playing, and the verses are going on, but you can feel them building a little bit. And the first verse, it actually repeats. There's kind of two verses back to back without a chorus, and the second one you just feel that it's building more than the first. And right at the end, as they and it looks like they're here to stay. It kind of lifts it up, and then the choruses on this song are really explosively more powerful than the verses. I mean, it just he blows into this, oh you. I mean, he really kind of belts this out and uses his vocals to really drive up the range and the power of the song. And then he backs back down again as we go into the choruses and into the verse, the next verse again. And the way that he does this, kind of building the tension, you're almost expecting something. It's coming now. Even if you've never heard this song before, you can feel it driving to that point. And I think this song is a great example of how he did that. Very thoughtful of leading the listener to the chorus. So as people are listening to the song, see if you can catch what I'm talking about. You can almost sense when the chorus is going to finally kick in, and he delivers when it does.
I mean, and that's really a fairly nuanced way of looking at how the song is structured, and I agree with how you laid that out. And it's also like that, sort of more music hall type where the people are looking at the singer who's kind of standing, and it is the singer themselves and their voice and their presentation and the peaks and valleys of the flow of the song that capture the attention more so than than like the drums and the bass and the guitar. And it's a strong performance, and it's one of Bowie's. I mean, I always, it is something that the first time I heard it, it's something that I remembered, and it's kind of stuck in my mind. Not as popular as Changes, in terms of how much airplay it got and whatnot. It's not a song you hear that you heard a lot on the radio.
No.
But it's another very strong, very characteristically Bowie song.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, the first two tracks on this side are both very strong and very characteristic of the Bowie who just sort of coalesced.
Yep.
The next song, which is called 8-Line Poem, is not one of Bowie's stronger compositions musically or lyrically. That's not to say it's bad, but it's musically very quiet. There's some very restrained guitar in there, and the song is it's between 2.5 3 minutes, but really there's just an 8-line poem are the lyrics. And it's basically there's a cactus by the singer's or the poet's window, and just the person is looking at it and looking what's in their room and then looking back out the window, and that's about it. And I don't know if there's a lot more to be said about it. I mean, as an 8-line poem, it's fine.
Hmm.
Nothing particularly striking about it. Nothing particularly sappy or bad about it either. Um, uh, uh, but it does not stand up to the first two songs on the side in terms of its impact, and nor the fourth song, the song that comes after it.
You know,
Um,
although it does when you take a look at the notion, which we that's what we do on this show of how it comes together as a side. I mean, we've talked about two songs that Changes and Oh You Pretty Things. They had these very powerful choruses in the song. There was real life and kind of drive in there, even though the songs themselves were not big rock tunes or anything like that. But it's a relatively short song, and it's very gentle. It kind of brings the mood to a quiet place, which you settle back down again, and you're going to end up needing it for Life on Mars, because again, it's the next song is it takes us back up there again.
and when that's kind of a good way of putting it. I mean, sort of, the song, if you're sitting around listening to the side, when this one comes, that's when it's a chance to light your cigarette or fill your
Yeah,
pipe, or
yeah.
whatever it might be, or talk to who you're with, if you're with someone listening to music for a minute. But in any event, it does move on to the fourth song on the side, which is another very characteristic Bowie song, "Life on Mars," and and again, that's the this spaceman role. You've got Space Oddity, Major Tom. You've got Is There Life on Mars? You've got Starman on Ziggy Stardust. The album after this one. Now, this song is not really about it's not a space song. It doesn't have
Hmm.
that sort of sci-fi, an alien is coming down to Earth from Mars. And this it tells a story. The song tells a story about a girl with mousy hair who basically lives her life at the movies,
Hmm.
and uh, and the movies aren't necessarily satisfying.
Hmm.
And so she asked the question: Is there life on Mars? And without picking apart the lyrics, the the impression that I take from this song is that the singer is just sort of anywhere but here.
Hmm.
There's got to be something more to life than what I'm experiencing here. The only really enjoyment I get is seeing these sort of stereotypical type scenarios that crop up in movies,
Hmm.
and I can't and I can't even get at that.
Hmm.
I just because when the movie's over and the lights go on, it's back to the same old song and dance. And so just that is there life on Mars? It's sort of, is there something somewhere
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's more satisfying than this?
Hmm.
And but the way that this song is put together musically is very much like you described the changes in Oh You Pretty Things. I believe,
Yeah.
uh, and it goes from different moods. The film is a saddening bore, for she's lived it 10 times or more. But then there's the sailors fighting in the dance hall
Hmm.
and stuff. And then that
And it
is there, and when he sings that line, "Is there life on Mars?" I mean, by this point, you listen to this album, and you know who you're listening to.
yes.
You see in your mind, David Bowie singing, with one hand with a microphone and another hand in the air, and looking up with this, philosophical look on his face. Is there life on Mars? So this song puts you right back in there with this
Oh
very
yeah.
very characteristic and very solid. David Bowie song.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, first of all, this is my favorite David Bowie song of not just on this album. It just is. I like the song. I like the way that it flows. Again, it's not a, you're not going to get any, giant guitar solos or anything like that. Very, very piano based, and but it takes you into where Bowie was trying to go. You talked about that transition from the chorus, from the verse to the chorus, those words about, but the film is a saddening bore, but she's lived it 10 times or more. Each line builds, and it's got a feel to it, like when you're standing, there's something that you could feel it building, but there's also something that's like tugging on you in the way the boom, boom. There's some stuff that's deep into it, and it kind of feels like you feel when you're standing in the ocean, and there's a big wave that's coming, but you feel the water pulling you out underneath as this wave is coming in. It's almost like it's dragging you down, and then in this one, the chorus of sailors dancing, fighting in the dance hall, it explodes, and it's coming. Again, he does such a great job of building up to it, and his voice and the way that he sings very high. He can sing low too, but he's got a great range, and he sings this very high. He's almost like screaming out what's going on, and I hadn't really thought a whole lot about the lyrics of this song when I was first listening to it. To me, it was almost like this is what this girl was seeing as she went out in the world, right? You go along, here's these people fighting on the street, right? Look at these cavemen, right, who, are understanding. And you can even picture there's a line that goes, take a look at the lawmen beating up the wrong guy. I mean, some poor schmuck is on the street corner and some cop is beating him up, and he's got the wrong guy. You can kind of see this person like looking at that on the street, not even just getting hung up on all these films that they're watching, but just walking down the street in a big city like London at this particular time and just be like, God, is there anything else than this? And it is about movies, and it is, you can tell as you study the lyrics a little bit more that it's clearly what it's about. But for years of listening to this song, just thought it was, she's got this horrible home life. She's got this, mother and father that have a weird dynamic, and a father that's telling her to get out, it's almost like the movies that she's watching, nothing can compare to the misery that she is experiencing in real life. And I've always seen this as just a great flow and a show of a song that is just really powerful to listen to.
Well, and I don't think that there needs to be a line of demarcation between what's happening in her real life and what represents what she's seeing in the movies, because ultimately the films are not, they're not enough. They're not satisfying, and so they're just a different version of the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I don't think that it has to be one or the other. Because that's probably the sort of thing she's seeing in her life. And she's kind of come to the conclusion that, well, yeah, going to a film, going to see the picture show is a way to escape or entertain oneself, but it's ultimately it isn't providing anything more than what she's seeing in the real world. But and I hadn't necessarily compared the songs in the way that you've described their similarities in terms of the building momentum of the songs, and I think your wave analogy is a good one. That's certainly something I never thought of until basically hearing you say it just now. But it's really a decent way to describe how the arrangement of this song and Oh You Pretty Things, for example, just builds to a very satisfying musical vocal climax that really is fairly uh, it's a good way for a melodramatic performer like David Bowie
Yeah, yeah,
to get himself across.
yeah.
But I agree. It is one of David Bowie's more representative songs.
Yeah.
And so this, with the little sort of, break with 8-line poem, this album has really been hitting its stride
Yes,
with
absolutely.
changes, Oh You Pretty Things, and Life on Mars.
Hmm.
But as you move on, the next song is called Kooks. And when before I'd ever actually heard, and I'm just looking at the back of the album cover, Kooks, I imagined that the song was going to be about crazy people, or at the very least weird,
Hmm.
weird people. And while to an extent that's true, I don't think there's really any dispute or any big revelation that Bowie wrote this song about his new infant son
Hmm.
at the time. And, he says, Will you stay in our lover's story? If you stay, you won't be sorry because we believe in you. Soon you'll grow, so take a chance with a couple of kooks hung up on romancing. Well, the
Hmm.
kooks are Bowie
Yeah.
and his son's mother.
Hmm.
And they're not. I mean, they may be weird, uh, but they're not crazy.
Yeah.
And something that I never necessarily thought about, but I read it recently on the internet. Apparently, when Bowie was writing the lyrics to this song, he was listening to a Neil Young album.
Hmm.
I don't know. Whatever I read, it didn't say which Neil Young album it was, but some have said that what Bowie was trying to do was kind of do a Neil Young song uh, in terms of how the song was arranged. And if you listen to
Hmm.
it, that's not that far fetched.
Hmm.
Now, Bowie is never going to
Yeah.
sound like Neil Young, or is never going to write lyrics like Neil Young.
Yeah.
But there's some legitimacy to that. But it's really it's a very it's a warmer song
Yeah.
than a lot of David Bowie's material. I mean, because some of the
And I,
I mean,
I think when you take a look at the story, having been a young parent myself, there's a lot that he is directly drawing from not only the experience of becoming a young parent, but what you hope for, right? As hoping that when you get older, you'll continue to hang around us kooks. He knows that his kids are going to look at him as a kook as he gets older, and all they've got going for themselves, the mom and the dad, is that they love each other. They're hung up on romancing. They love each other, and we hope that you'll hang with us couple kooks. But also, like you can see, we bought a lot of things to keep you warm and dry, and a funny old crib on which the paint won't dry. So they bought these things, but they've now had to do some things that they've never done before. And fixing up an old crib and painting it is probably something that had never been a part of David Bowie's world before, as are a lot of the things that new parents have to do. And it's like, geez, I painted it, but for some reason the paint just won't dry. Why? Because I don't know anything about painting. But I'm trying to, and this is, probably symbolic of a lot of the things that parents are doing, trying to get ready for that first child, and realizing they don't really know what they're doing in a lot of things. I mean, I see this as such a genuine reflection of some of the things that they went through preparing to have a child, and even in the final verse where they're giving some, he's giving some guidance to his son about, look at, maybe this is how things can go in the future.
well, and some of it's kind of fun
Yeah.
where he sings, and if you ever have to go to school, remember how they messed up this old fool.
Hmm.
Don't pick fights with the bullies or the cads, because I'm not much cop at punching other people's
Yeah, yeah,
dads.
yeah, that's right.
So
I'm
it's sort
not
of like
very
the
good at I don't need. Please don't get me into fights with any other dads out there. Yeah,
and sort of saying, hey, if school is still like it was when I went through it, it's got some look what it did to
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Um, so it's a lot different than any of the material so far, and it's almost just like, like you say, a proud young father is just happily trying to think of what to tell his son, and think of ways to guide his son, as who was apparently an infant at the time,
Yeah.
relatively newborn, and was going to be growing up. So in some ways, it doesn't necessarily fit neatly into the subject matter of the record up to this side, or up to this point. But it's just kind of a little, just maybe just a little break from that, to just a pleasant song about a new father,
Yeah.
and the sort of happiness that can accompany the new experiences
And,
that come
and
with parenthood.
and you can almost see him like saying, as they're trying to put this album together and all these other songs that they've been working on, and it's kind of like, well, where's this one going to fit in? It's like, well, I don't care, but I wrote it and I like it and it's important to me, so it's going on the album. And it's a pleasant song to listen to. I'd agree with you. This certainly isn't what you would point someone to if they were interested in learning what David Bowie was like, right? It's kind of its own unique song, but again, very pleasant, and kind of a nice song to help us ride towards the end of this side.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, musically, it's not unlike listening to just a Neil Young song.
Yep, yep.
If you forget about the lyrics and just listen to the kind of music it is, it's not an unpleasant song, and
Hmm.
the fact that he chooses to sing about something that's relatively upbeat, is um, uh, shouldn't be anything wrong with it.
Yep.
Which paradoxically brings us to the last song, on the side, which is, I would not call it upbeat,
Yeah.
or is called Quicksand.
Uh-huh.
And Quicksand, it's a ballad. It's a relatively quiet song, with acoustic guitars, but it is not. I mean, it's a relatively dark
Yes.
lyrically. It's a relatively dark song, and I think that what the Quicksand is that, if you, uh uh basically, I think what he's saying, and I guess we can come right to the point, when in the verse where he sings, "If I don't explain what you ought to know, you can tell me about it on the next Bardo. I'm sinking in the quicksand of my thought, and I ain't got the power anymore." I think the quicksand is if you try to understand what life is really about, and you take too much time and put in too much effort in that endeavor, you are going to sink in quicksand.
Yeah.
I mean, that is basically the message, I believe, that he's
Hmm.
sending here. And because he makes references to all these different things. He mentions Golden Dawn. He
Yeah.
specifically mentions Crowley. He
Hmm.
mentions Himmler. He talks about Garbo's eyes and Churchill's lies.
Hmm.
Um, uh, you know, uh, he's just
Well,
talking
yeah,
about all.
or faith. He talks about faith. I think you're spot on about what it's about, and it's also a criticism of whether it be people or institutions that are telling you they've figured it out, and you should listen to them. The he talks about the great salvation of bullshit faith. I feel talking about the church there, and what he thought of it, and so I'd agree. It's like the more you get wrapped up in this stuff, it becomes quicksand, and whether that's quicksand of your time, right? Where you're wasting time, or just drags down your own spirit and thought and creativity and that type of thing. But I'd agree. It's like maybe we weren't known to actually know everything, because he even tells when you'll know what's going on when you die, basically.
Well, and so on the one hand, it's not a particularly uplifting message, but but it is. But I do think that that if Bowie were around to question, that he might say, look, despite the fact that you're never going to truly know the answer, to what life, the universe, and everything is all about, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue to learn as time goes by. And Lou Reed wrote a song, and Bowie was a fan of Lou Reed's, and Lou Reed wrote the song "Beginning to See the Light." He said, "I'm beginning to see the light. Some people work very hard, but still they never get it right. But I'm beginning to see the light." The key there, beginning.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible that Bowie's message here is similar. It's like, you can't just say to heck with it. It's not worth the endeavor, but you can let yourself, if you're not careful, drown in the quicksand.
Yeah.
And maybe the specific things that you're talking about, accepting, maybe the quicksand is those who claim to know the answer, more so than actually searching on your own for meaning, even if it doesn't, or for something, even if it doesn't provide the quote answer to what life is all about.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not a, I mean, the music is not particularly, there's nothing dark about the music. I mean, it's relatively quiet song, and the lyrics aren't sung in a menacing way, and so it's sort of more of an acceptance.
Yeah.
The tone of the song is more one of acceptance of this. You're never really gonna know until you get there.
Yeah.
But it's not a sad, morose, hopeless song. It's more of a contemplative song.
I agree.
And some of the things that are sung about earlier, this is sort of an acceptance of that, and it's substantial lyrically, in my opinion, and certainly not as well known or as sing-songy or popular. It certainly doesn't have that building momentum like some of the other songs have. But it's a substantial song, and one that if you don't have to listen to the whole side, a lot of people might not get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is a shame, because it's a worthwhile song, and certainly a worthwhile closing to what I believe is a great side.
Well, I agree, and it's we talked about a number of the songs that are much more powerful, much more up, and sometimes it is good just to slow down as you come down to the end of the side, and give you an opportunity to think a little bit about it. But I mean, it's a great side, and it does have a number of songs that are in Bowie's top songs. This is for a person that had a lot of very good material.
Yeah. So, for anyone interested in David Bowie, a good place to start is Hunky Dory, side one.
Great side. Great conversation, Mike.
All right. Talk to you next time.